my great pleasure to be able to introduce you during your eating time to Kate Young. Kate is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Procurement and Accessibility, Minister Qualtrough, and also the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Science and Sport, Minister Duncan. And we're very, very honored to have Kate here today. I had the pleasure of meeting Kate last night. And I think that the synergies that are being created in the federal government from our elected politicians is phenomenal with the work we're doing here. So Kate was first elected Member of Parliament for London West in October 2015. She is the Parliamentary Secretary for Science and Sport and the Parliamentary Secretary for Public Services and Procurement and Accessibility. She has also served as the Parliamentary Secretary for Transport. Prior to being elected, Kate had a lengthy career in journalism and public relations in both the private and public sector. And that's all she's going to let me say about her. So I think that at this time, the podium is yours. Welcome, and thank you very much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maureen. It was a pleasure to meet you last night. It's every so often you meet someone who you think, I could just sit down and talk to this woman for hours and hours. And I think we would have if left to our own devices. But anyway, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today and to see so many familiar faces because of not only last night, but because of some of the things that we've been doing as a government lately. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. I would like to thank the Canadian Council on Rehabilitation and Work, CCRW, of course, for inviting me to this year's Disability and Work in Canada conference. I commend your leadership in working with the disability community to develop a national strategy to improve the level of employment of people with disabilities. By working together on issues like employment, we can improve accessibility for people with disabilities who have for too long faced barriers. And you are stronger working together than apart. I do have a personal interest and connection with the work you do, and I wanted to tell you about it to underscore how important I realize your work is to Canadians. In my former life, before politics, I worked at TD Canada Trust as manager of public relations and community relations in southwestern Ontario. And this was back 13 years ago. And at that time, the bank was already realizing the importance of hiring people with disabilities. It was in this role that I came to know other people in businesses throughout London who were also starting to realize that hiring people with disabilities isn't just the right thing to do, it's good for business. And so the Ability First Coalition was born in London and continues to this day, encouraging and honoring businesses that hire and retain people with disabilities. And I put the emphasis on retain. So when the Prime Minister called and asked me to serve as Parliamentary Secretary to Minister Qualtrough, the Minister of Accessibility, I was beyond thrilled. I know that this issue is just getting bigger and we have to keep pushing to make changes. The numbers speak for themselves. Persons with disabilities face lower employment rates, with only 59% being employed compared to 80% of Canadians without disabilities. And what these numbers tell us is that there are thousands of people with disabilities, a vast and largely untapped pool of talent, and some of the most innovative, resilient, and dedicated individuals that our communities have to offer, who are available to work and want to join the workforce. By working together, we can find the opportunities to tap into this labor pool that we know is within reach. Yesterday, of course, as you know, was the United Nations International Day of Persons with Disabilities, an annual day to celebrate the accomplishments of persons with disabilities, and a day to reflect on the barriers to accessibility and inclusion that too many Canadians continue to face. This year's theme, Empowering Persons with Disabilities and Ensuring Inclusiveness and Equality, highlighted the need for people around the world to build more inclusive societies where all people are treated equally. From coast to coast to coast, Canadians came together to celebrate our achievements and look towards building upon the work we have done. On that front, I am pleased to share that our government, your federal government, is taking further action to uphold and safeguard the rights of people with disabilities as Canada acceded to the optional protocol to the UN's Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. This means that Canadians now have additional recourse if they believe that their rights under the Convention have been violated. In addition, just a few days ago, we released the 2017 Canadian Survey on Disability, which is the largest, most comprehensive survey of its kind and provides reliable statistics on Canadians aged 15 years and over with disabilities. According to the survey, approximately 22% of Canadians over the age of 15, and that represents 6.2 million Canadians, reported having a disability that limited them in their daily activities. And as I mentioned previously, people with disabilities also face lower employment rates. Having access to up-to-date data is critical to helping us better understand the current realities of persons with disabilities and helping us inform our decisions when considering the potential impacts of a program, policy, or initiative. While there are legal and social reasons to promote the inclusion of Canadians with disabilities, there is also a very strong business case for doing so as well. The 2017 survey also indicates that of the approximately 1.5 million Canadians with a disability, age 15 to 64, who are unemployed, approximately 654,000 are potential workers. This is a huge number. Businesses cannot ignore. Not only can this untapped talent pool improve Canada's shrinking labor market, but it can generate billions annually for the Canadian economy. And to put it bluntly, these are potential and future taxpayers. In addition to their potential contribution as workers, Canadians with disabilities and their families also represent significant purchasing power in the Canadian economy. Improving workplace accessibility and inclusion for individuals with disabilities can have an overwhelmingly positive impact. It can lead to an increase in productive capacity and a permanently higher level of economic activity. Businesses who have figured this out are seeing real impact. In other words, improving accessibility means more production by employees, immense benefits for families, greater profits for business, and a better quality of life for all Canadians. There is also a significant and sustained culture change that is needed to create a barrier-free Canada, but this depends on getting everyone on board. By integrating accessibility more consistently into existing systems across all sectors under federal jurisdiction, we are building awareness and capacity for a culture that is truly inclusive and accessible. I believe that our government's actions will inspire Canadians to get on board with forward-looking initiatives and practices that will level the playing field for all Canadians. Let me tell you about the concrete action our government is doing to advance accessibility and inclusion in this country. The cornerstone of our strategy is Bill C-81, the Accessible Canada Act, which passed the House of Commons with unanimous support just last week and is now currently making its way through the Senate. In fact, this morning, Minister Qualtrough and I had the opportunity to have breakfast with a number of senators who had questions about this bill. This game-changing bill sends a strong message. Our government is taking action to advance accessibility and inclusion and is leading the way to make Canada a barrier-free country for everyone. If passed, this legislation will proactively identify, remove, and prevent barriers in a number of priority areas, ensuring we are inclusive by design. but it is also about changing existing federal government structures and systems to ensure that old and new programs, policies, and initiatives respond to the needs of persons with disabilities equally. This will enable easier use of transportation, access to buildings and institutions, use of information and communication technologies, and have services delivered in ways that are accessible. This historic bill reflects the work, commitment, and contributions of the disability community, who for decades have been tireless advocates for a more inclusive and accessible Canada. There is no doubt that the Accessible Canada Act will make it easier for persons with disabilities find and keep good jobs, have access to better resources, and have a fair chance at success like all Canadians. It would create a framework and new organizations for developing accessibility standards, establishing and enforcing accessibility requirements, and monitoring implementation. It would apply to the Government of Canada and all Crown corporations, as well as the federally regulated private sector, including organizations in the transportation sector, the broadcasting and the telecommunications sectors, and the banking and financial sectors. This represents 1.2 million employees, with 500,000 people employed by the Government of Canada and its agencies. This legislation is only one element of our broader effort to improve the social and economic inclusion of people with disabilities. It lays the groundwork for a sustained cultural change. In this spirit, we have committed approximately $290 million over 6 years to establish the systems and processes required to implement our proposed legislation. Our commitment also includes $18 million over 6 years in additional funding to the Opportunities Fund, a program that helps people with disabilities prepare for, obtain, and maintain employment. This funding will help improve employment outcomes for more persons with disabilities by expanding existing programs to better support matching services that connect employers with persons with disabilities. It will also help businesses develop effective recruitment and retention strategies. I am proud to say that with the Accessible Canada Act, we will work to bring about an important cultural change in the public and private sectors through concrete actions we are taking to encourage accessibility. I hope that our government's actions will inspire the business sector to create opportunities for individuals with disabilities to contribute to our economy. There is still a lot of work to do to create a Canada without barriers. But realizing an accessible Canada is a national goal within reach. So today, I call on everyone in this room to share the tangible measures you have been putting in place to include people with disabilities loudly and broadly across your business communities. As champions for inclusion, you can play a crucial role in encouraging businesses across Canada to get on board and eliminate barriers to accessibility in Canada. Together, we can build a country that gives everyone a real and fair chance at success. Thank you very much. Merci. Thank you. Thank you.